Thank you, Rafi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Let me begin by 2 points. First, Andre, if you're watching Netflix, I think the movie that you really should be watching is The Present, a 24-minute movie that shows from a human perspective what Palestinians go through on a daily basis. And Rafi, you quoted Desmond Tutu earlier on, one of the fathers of human rights in South Africa, of course, and democracy. I prefer this quote of Tutu's. If you are neutral, Desmond Tutu says, Archbishop Desmond Tutu says, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. This was the wisdom, or is the wisdom, of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and I think that this is what will guide my remarks for today. I had a long speech prepared, but before the session started, I decided to change my speech. I am a South African who is in solidarity with the Palestinian people. My solidarity comes from the fact that I am human, I am South African, and I'm Muslim. As someone who is in solidarity with an oppressed people, I prefer to listen to what the oppressed people have to say in terms of what they want, in terms of the solidarity. And from the Palestinian perspective, particularly, I listen to what is being asked by Palestinian civil society, and especially the BDS National Committee that is based in Ramallah, that is a coordinator globally of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, a non-violent campaign to end Israel's occupation. Let me say that the issue that we're talking about is not, as some speakers have said, it is not complex. It is actually very simple. The issue is also not about religion. This is not about Muslims against Jews or Jews against Muslims, which of course ignores completely the fact that about 12 to 15% of Palestinians are actually Christian. Islam and Judaism has nothing to do with this issue. This issue is not about disconnection. It's not, if we talk together and made nice and smile, everything will be good. This is not about that. I'm South African. We had lots of connections between black and white people, and we were still killed by the white people. This issue actually is about colonialism, it is about occupation, and it is about apartheid. All three of which are defined by me in terms of international law. This is not something anyone pulls out of their pocket. Colonialism is illegal under international law. Occupation, long-term occupation, as we're seeing that Israel does in Palestinian territory, is illegal under international law. Apartheid is illegal under international law in terms of the Convention for the suppression and punishment of the crime of apartheid and the Rome Statute. This is what Israel is guilty of. Colonialism, occupation, and apartheid. Let's be clear about this. This is not about if we sing together, we'll be happy. Singing and dancing has nothing to do with the issue here. People are removed from their homes, people are massacred, and this is what we are talking about. And so don't tell us, please, that both Jewish Israelis and Palestinians suffer. You cannot compare the suffering of those who are occupied, colonized, and face racism and apartheid to the so-called suffering of those who perpetrate all of those injustices. And let me say that among the worst of the Jewish Israelis are the settlers. The settlers are among the worst. Of course, firstly, under international law, all settlements are illegal. All settlements are illegal. The settlers, we watch it on the news all the time. Settlers in the West Bank are guilty of uprooting olive trees that are hundreds and thousands of years old. They're guilty of destroying, burning the livestock of Palestinian people. They're guilty of poisoning the water of Palestinian people. Not too long ago, settlers in the West Bank killed a child, made him drink petrol and set him alight, a child. And I know Mr. Nagin will say that he organized a prayer meeting in support of that family. Prayer meetings don't do anything. These are settlers. This is what they did. Most recently, not most recently, right now, we are seeing what the settlers are doing in Sheikh Jarrah, ethnic cleansing, and in Silwan, ethnic cleansing. When Nagin talks about this King David area where he has his interfaith activities, this area is Silwan, where people are being ethnically cleansed today. And among the worst of the settlers, I should say, are the settlers in Hebron. I implore people to watch YouTube videos about what settlers in Hebron do to the Palestinians there. You have a few hundred settlers in Hebron, in Khalil, with the correct name for it, guarded by a few thousand Israeli troops. In February 1994, the main masjid in Hebron, the Ibrahimi Masjid, was attacked by Baruch Goldstein, a settler in Hebron. He killed dozens, scores of people while they were praying the Fajr prayer in the masjid. Do you know what the response of the Israeli authorities was? The response of the Israeli authorities was that they divided that masjid into two and made one part of it a synagogue. Nagin talks in an interview about how his wife goes to the synagogue, this synagogue that is supposed to be a masjid. He says, he talks about how we should have a Palestinian state, but he is a settler living south of Hebron in an illegal settlement. How do we listen to someone who lives in a settlement, who is a settler, who is illegal even under international law? Now, this came to my notice just a little while before I got on this webinar, and this is the reason why I changed my speech. Because normally I will not speak on a platform with a settler who is one of the most racist people that you can come across. Rabbi Nagin lives in the settlement of Otniel, south of Hebron. He represents also a settler organization that builds schools and settlement infrastructure in the settlement of Gush Etzion. Now, Gush Etzion too is illegal under international law. All of these settlements are destroying Palestinian lives, destroying Palestinian homes. They are destroying Jerusalem. They are destroying Khalil, Hebron. They are destroying Bethlehem. Bethlehem is surrounded on three sides by settlements and on one side by the wall. There is no possibility of that city expanding, growing. People who have children, their children have to leave because of these settlements. This is what settlers are. Palestinians have called on us not to normalize relations with settlers. I respect that call. I support boycotts, divestment, and sanctions, and I support the call not to normalize relations with settlers and settlement organizations. Let me say that I'm not fooled by this language of interfaith that comes across from racists and from settlers. I was part of the interfaith movement in South Africa for decades. We understood interfaith to be about people of religion, people of faith getting together to struggle together for justice, not to justify injustice and to justify oppression. Now, Rabbi Nagin might say that this is intolerant. No, what is intolerant is ethnic cleansing that we're seeing taking place in Sheikh Jarrah. What is intolerant is the apartheid meted out to Palestinians all over Palestine. What is intolerant is the murder and repeated massacres that take place in Gaza, what Israelis call mowing the lawn, because they don't even regard people in Gaza as human beings. They just mow the lawn. He will say, I am against peace. I'm South African. I know the value of peace. I know the value of democracy, and I don't see it in Israel. What I do see in Israel as a South African is apartheid. I am against injustice. I am against oppression. When Rabbi Nagin leaves his illegal settlement, which is on stolen land, and he goes back to his home in the United States, when he renounces the settlements, when he calls for the whole of the Ibrahimi Masjid to be returned to the Muslims, then I will invite him for a meal to my house. Until then, I cannot engage with him. I cannot be on the same platform as him. Now, after I had already joined this webinar, I received a message from Samir, the Palestinian who was supposed to be a participant in this. I want to read this brief message. Samir said, I cannot continue with an event that violates basic BDS principles. I grew up in the Fawar refugee camp just minutes away from where the Israeli speaker currently lives. We have never met and will likely never meet. That is because we live under two very different systems of life. There is no ethical coexistence here. This is the reality of apartheid. His mere presence in an illegal settlement is not only a violation of international law, but a violation of my basic human rights and right to live in dignity. I cannot, as a Palestinian in good conscience, ignore the land dispossession and killing of children in my refugee camp as a result of settlers like our speaker today and pretend to focus on interfaith dialogue. Having said that, I want to call on the Alumni Forum to organize another event, one that is actually about interfaith relations in the struggle for justice. I will be very happy to participate in that, but for now, I cannot continue to remain on this platform and I have to withdraw from this seminar. Thank you very much.
Mr. Naim Jeenah, I hear what you have to say, and I cannot speak for the Indonesian government, but I do hear your words and do see the facts and reality that we face when it comes to the conflict of, not the conflict, the situation between Israel and Palestine. And I do not want to assume the role of a mediator in any official way. It's not my right to do so. But I know that you will have to withdraw from this platform, and I respect your views and your values. Desmond Tutu would have always wanted us to fight for the principles, because fighting for what's right is worth it. But Mr. Naim Jeenah, I just want to say, if there is a huge violation in your view of international law, how should the international community act? And in this sense, how can we bring peace into the table as part of the discussion? How do you see peace, actually? I think that's a very important issue for us to at least understand.
Rafi, I would love to respond to your question, and I could discuss this for hours very calmly. But having been called upon by Palestinians to withdraw from this event, I really, as someone in solidarity, I cannot continue. I would love to continue with this discussion because I think the question you're raising is more important than anything I've said, but I cannot, I'm sorry.
Very well. But as a courtesy, I think we'd like to thank you for your participation, albeit brief. But again, as Indonesia is a diverse country, we respect the values of everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you for joining us and have a good day.